All right. Let's bring up the dual immersion presentation, and I know we have speakers. Do we want to bring them up after or before? I think they wanted to come up after, Chris. Yeah. So the speakers will come up and speak after the presentation.
Good morning, President Williams, board members, superintendent, and executive staff. Our presentation this morning consists of 3 sections. I will start with a general overview of our dual immersion and native speakers heritage language programs. Ceci will follow and share a dual immersion principal and principal supervisor perspective with respect to supporting and expanding dual immersion programs. And lastly, in what will no doubt be a rather heroic effort given his laryngitis, Brian will share with you the district's thinking around the expansion of our dual immersion programs. For decades, there has been a dearth of evidence-based research around the benefits of a dual immersion program. We knew things instinctively, but we didn't really have the data to support that. In the last 4 or 5 years, there has been a plethora of evidence-based research coming out of such institutions as the Harvard Graduate School of Education, the RAND Corporation, the George Mason University, and NPR Education. The research synthesized lists these benefits of dual immersion: attention, that dual speakers outperform monolinguals on general measures of executive function, fundamentally paying attention. In empathy, that our bilingual children as young as age 3 demonstrate a head start on tests of perspective taking and theory of mind, which simply means understanding themselves and others. Reading in English. By the end of middle school, dual immersion students outperform their peers in English reading skills by a full year. School performance and engagement, higher achievement test scores, happier in school, better attendance, more parent involvement, fewer behavioral concerns were noted in students that were bilingual and/or in programs for bilingual education and dual immersion. Diversity and integration. There's an improved sense of belonging and parental involvement when the home language is valued in the school setting. And lastly, one that I found quite intriguing, that being actively speaking more than one language has been shown to be protection against cognitive decline, and that was from a Canadian Alzheimer's study. In Long Beach Unified, our dual immersion and heritage language programs build on a history of successful programs back into the 1980s with Henry's Title VII grant as La Escuela. We have exemplary instructional programs as noted by both state and national recognition awards. We have a committed teacher community and strong parental support and community involvement. About 4 years ago, a committee of administrators, teachers, parents, and other community representatives came together over a 6-month period to develop a vision and program objectives for our dual immersion schools. The vision is that our dual immersion programs implement a developmental Spanish-English two-way language model of instruction, serving native speakers of English and native speakers of Spanish. Students from the 2 language groups attend class together, learn from each other, and receive academic instruction in both languages. Program goals that this committee enumerated were that students would develop high levels of oral language skills and literacy in both English and Spanish. They would attain academic achievement at or above grade level as measured in both languages. They would hold positive attitudes towards school and themselves, and exhibit knowledge about and positive attitudes towards other cultures. We have 3 program models in Long Beach. At the elementary levels and middle school, we have a 90-10 dual immersion in Spanish and English, a 50-50 dual immersion in Spanish and English, and we offer native speakers heritage language courses at the high school in both Spanish and Khmer. Those courses run a continuum for our students who come to us with very limited oral skills, as well as students who are literate and conversant in their target language. So we have Spanish for Spanish speakers and Khmer for Khmer speakers, 1 through 8. Our students who are advanced or have completed a Spanish for Spanish speakers sequence can transition into AP Spanish language, AP Spanish literature, and a course that we developed locally here in Long Beach that has language other than English or category E approval from the A to G sequencing is a Spanish interpretation and translation. There are actually 3 courses: legal, medical, and educational. This is very much career-oriented in that it trains students to prepare for court-appointed interpretation translation exams. Our schools offering the 90-10 model are Bixby Elementary, which offers dual immersion in kindergarten and grade 1, approximately 165 students. Henry Elementary, which offers a program TK through grade 5 with 870 students. Webster, which offers a dual immersion track, grades K through 5 with 118 students. And our all dual immersion Keller Middle School, grades 6 through 8, with approximately 404 students. In describing the 90-10 versus the 50-50 model, the first number, 90, refers to the amount of instruction in the target language, which would be Spanish, and increases by a 10% model each year to where the students between grades 4 and 8 are at a 50-50. Half of the instruction is in Spanish, half of the instruction is English. We have a few schools who start at a 50-50 model, so they are getting 50% of their instruction in the target language Spanish and 50% in English. You will notice the asterisk for Henry and Keller. These are 2 of our schools that are fully dual immersion versus the other sites which offer a dual immersion track within a school setting. Our schools offering the 50-50 model are Lafayette Elementary, offering kindergarten through grade 5 with 328 students currently enrolled, and Webster Elementary also offering dual immersion kindergarten through grade 5 with 213 students.
If I could just stop you there for a second. Our handouts don't match up to the slides exactly. So the
Go with the
information
slide.
okay, go with the slide.
Yeah, what you're noting is that Willard was previously in the 50-50 model.
Thank you.
Our schools that offer native speakers and heritage language model are, this is a 9-12 model. These are a discrete course that students take, or a sequence of courses they can take. All of them are approved for A to G, specifically E credit. So our students are having the benefit of developing their native speaker abilities, as well as getting their credit for their world language course. Our program for native speakers and heritage language leverages the typically oral proficiency that our students bring to the class and introduces them to a more fully academic course of study in the language that includes reading and writing. Our middle school offering the native speakers program is Avalon. At our high schools, we have Avalon, Browning, Cabrillo, Cams, Jordan, Lakewood, McBride, Milliken, Poly, Renaissance, Sato, and Wilson offering these courses in Spanish. And we have a Khmer program, Khmer for Khmer speakers at Wilson.
Pam, explain a little bit further for me, if you please, the native-speaking heritage model.
So native speakers tend to come to us, especially at the high school age range, with ability in the 5 domains of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Sometimes at grade level, but other times they have a literacy component in their tool bag. And that would be a native speakers program. So we have 4 years of native speakers. Students are assessed when they come in, and they're placed according to if there is just an oral proficiency that they're bringing, they'll probably be in the 1-2 section. If they're coming with considerable reading and writing skills in addition to oral proficiency, they may be placed in 5, 6, 7, 8. In some cases, they may transition directly into AP Spanish language. And then they have a full continuum to move forward of the offerings.
In terms of transferring those units to college to meet an entrance requirement, does that suffice?
All of them do, yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Does this mean perhaps that in our regular Spanish classes, we're dwelling a little bit more on conversation rather than just conjugating verbs?
It does. What is particularly challenging for a student who comes to us with oral proficiency from their home or their community to sit and learn, for example, in Spanish 1, how to count and how to use greetings, that is just such a mismatch for them, that having this program is honoring what they bring to us and moving them forward.
Very good. Thank you.
And the heritage language is a fairly new term that recognizes that we have students that may be 2nd or 3rd generation in the United States, and so it is for them their heritage, and they typically don't bring a full suite of reading, writing, listening, speaking skills.
Very good.
The instructional resources that we are using for our dual immersion in K-8, we have Spanish language arts in TK through grade 5, which is our Maravillas series. What is very helpful for our students is that Maravillas is the Spanish corollary of our ELA program, which is called Wonders. So the skills and standards are the same that are taught. They're from the Common Core standards, but done in the Maravillas with authentic literature rather than translated literature. Our Spanish language arts in 612, our Spanish for Spanish speakers, uses Nuevas Vistas. We have been very diligent in that our core text adoptions have a Spanish component. So one of the things when we send out a notice to a publisher requesting samples, for example, the process we just went through with our science adoption for Amplify, one of the requirements that we place on the publishers is that there be a Spanish version available. We have some supplemental resources that are available in Spanish. For example, Khan Academy allows students to switch between multiple languages, and we are actively exploring other resources that are available in Spanish. We actually have a few of our dual immersion sites who are piloting some of these supplemental resources to inform other schools of their usefulness or not. Our native or heritage languages program use the core adoptions in Spanish and Khmer, Nuevas Vistas, Voces Hispánicas, the AP texts, and Let's Learn Cambodian. The assessments that we are currently collecting the fairly new California Assessment in Spanish, known as the CSA. It measures students' competency in Spanish reading, language arts. It's a component of our CAS program, which would be SBAC corollary. So it's for grades 3 through 8 and 11. Our adopted series of Maravillas has placement, diagnostic, unit, and benchmark assessments that teachers can use. We are in the process this year with the adoption of the Lexia Rapid Assessments and Lexia Core 5 supplemental materials for English language arts in grades TK through 5. We have teams of teachers who are both receiving face-to-face training as well as contributing to the work to develop a reading profile that uses multiple measures. And we have a separate track for our dual immersion teachers who are attending training specific to how English language arts and Spanish language arts are taught in grades TK through 5, and will be developing their own assessment suite to inform a reading profile for our teachers.
Pam, once again, I'm a little concerned that the assessment does not include conversation.
There is opportunity for that during the embedded curriculum assessment, but just like SBAC has a listening component, so also does the CSA, but not a speaking component. So the CSA closely mirrors SBAC. It's considered a summative end-of-the-year assessment. However, the Maravillas resources do contain quite a bit of opportunities to assess oral proficiency.
I see. Thank you.
This year for our dual immersion professional development series, I've just called out our current offerings. All of our dual immersion teachers are attending the Lexia and English Reading Profile series, which is a series of 4 face-to-face trainings. We have elementary DI teacher teams that are working with curriculum staff around developing a Spanish reading profile that would use multiple measures and could include oral proficiency. We are sending all of our dual immersion administrators and they selected teacher teams to go with them to the LA County Office of Education dual immersion series this year. It included initially some direct instruction for all of the participants, and it is followed up by some opportunities to visit other exemplary dual immersion programs so that we're learning from our colleagues in the field. And you just approved the adoption of Amplify, our science materials aligned to NGSS. It is available in Spanish. We will be having face-to-face training for all teachers in the spring, and we'll have a separate track for our dual immersion teachers. Some ways that we can celebrate are to remember that our 8th grade advanced placement Spanish language and culture exam is taken by about 80% of our students, dual immersion students at Henry, and over the years their pass rate has been 90 to 100%.
And I think it's interesting to note that the AP exam is designed more for high school students.
Oh, yes.
And it's a college test. So to have our 8th graders passing it at that rate is phenomenal.
And it has required us to develop some follow-up courses for them at the high school so that they continue to expand their skills. That was the exact reason that we wrote the interpretation and translation courses. They are highly advanced. They're not easy. California awards the State Seal of Biliteracy to graduating seniors. There are multiple criteria that the students need to meet, and most can't meet that criteria until grade 12. In terms of proficiency, I know our dual immersion students could demonstrate that proficiency. It's just that the way the law around the state seal is written, it has to be delayed until, or can't be awarded until grade 12. We have also been, We've also received numerous requests when CABE, our California Association for Bilingual Education, holds their annual conference here in the Long Beach area, which is every other year. They always reach out to us early and say, we want to offer our attendees the opportunity to visit your schools, which is one of the highest compliments that your colleagues in the field who are very immersed in bilingual education ask to visit our schools.
Also, as a celebration, is it still true that our fifth graders at Henry outperform fifth graders across the district?
For the most part, we have seen very good results on our academic measures from our dual immersion program at Henry, which of course is our longest standing program and most developed. I'm now going to transition our presentation to Ceci, who will talk about growing our programs and supporting them as a principal and principal supervisor.
Good morning. Good morning,
Good morning.
President Williams, board members, Superintendent Steinhauser, and exec staff. I have the pleasure of talking about growing and also supporting our DI program. I want to begin with Henry and Henry's journey, because we recognize Henry now for the established, real, sought-out program. But I wanted to give kind of a historical perspective and the journey. I began principalship there in 1999, and yes, that was 20 years ago. And at that time, we had just passed Proposition 227. So it was the English-only rule. And it became quite problematic for a newly established program. We were 9 years in existence. And while that might seem like a lot of years, at that time, it still was fairly new. And we were still trying to develop a really established program. And so I had 6 kinder classes then, and 2 of those classes were immersion, 4 were English only. So Henry, the DI program there, was just a small strand within a larger school. We were about almost close to 1,000 students at that time. So we had a number of buses that would come from crosstown communities, and we didn't have a lot of neighborhood that attended Henry. And so it was an effort on the part of the staff and the community to recruit that we were doing something of value there. We were teaching students 2 languages. And so it became quite the journey, and we now know how it ended. So I was proud at the time. It was a lot of work to get the neighborhood. We did lots of recruitment efforts, presentations across the town, and going to now, this year, Henry is in its 29th year of an established program. So it's well recognized, and I'm proud of it, and every time I attend Henry, so proud of the fact that all the efforts back in the day really, really worked out. When I moved into principal supervisor, I had the pleasure of working with, at the time, Principal Comatz, who was in its last year, so it was the last 5th grade class that then became a full DI program. So they are a full DI program. They're in their 6th year of full DI. We know that it's a well sought out program. Lots of folks do school of choice, choose Henry as a focus. And so in my work as principal supervisor, we last year had the privilege of opening up Bixby Elementary School. And I worked with Principal Plattis in developing that program. And so there was, the recruitment efforts were fairly easy. Dually programs now, it sells itself. You don't have to do a lot in recruitment efforts. So working with Principal Plattis and the recruitment efforts and media, social media, we were able to get out the message fairly quickly. And we had a large response from the community. So the Bixby community came and really wanted the program. We were also able to support some of the school of choice parents who had asked for Henry and didn't get accepted into Henry. We were able to accommodate a few of those parents at Bixby. So last year, working with Principal Plattis, it was staffing that became the, I won't say the concern, but the work that had to be done. We needed to find qualified teachers. Believe it or not, just because you're a B-clad does not mean that you automatically want to teach in a dual program. So you have to be able to read, write, speak, and teach. And so some of us who are bilingual, including myself, it's hard. And so you really want to be able to do that. So that's where most of our work came to, was the recruitment efforts. But every vacancy that did come up, so we did have some vacancies with retirements and transfers, we wound up filling each position with a B-clad teacher because we knew that we were going to phase this program in. So last year, we opened 2 kinder classes, and then we remained 2 EO classes. So every student who wanted to remain at Bixby and didn't want to go into a DI program, we were able to accommodate them as well. This year, moving forward, we've opened up 4 classes there, DI, and we have 2 remaining first grade classrooms. So the work to be done is to continue to phase in. So as we go the following year, we'll have 4 first grade classes, and then we'll have 2 second grade. So we'll just every year phase it in until you have that last class in 5th grade, similar to what happened to us when we were at Henry. This year, I have the honor, principal supervisor working, and I've moved to the middle school K-8 work, and I have the pleasure of working with Keller Dual Immersion Program. I know that Pamela Secchi talked a little bit about their enrollment. They began in 15-16 with 216 students, and currently now they're at 404 students. They have 2 classes per subject that they're able to offer, and in English language arts and in math this year, there are 3 courses that they're able to offer. We talked about their AP passing rate, successful passing rate, and my work with Principal Tomas Espinosa there would be just in supporting him and recruiting from all the DI programs moving forward to attend their Keller. Thank you.
All right, I haven't heard my voice in 2 hours, so I wasn't sure what it would sound like, but it actually sounds okay. Some people would be happy to have me lose my voice, my wife included, but we'll see if we can make it last year. So, as you've heard from both Pamela Secchi and Cecilia Camarino, we've had a growing interest in dual immersion programs in our district over many years. And so what we're always trying to do is we're always trying to gauge the interest of our communities. We have Ed Code language you can read here that requires districts to consider opening language acquisition programs if there's enough interest among the families at a particular school. So if you have parents of 30 students at any one school or 20 students in any one grade level, then we're obligated to look at the feasibility of starting a language acquisition program for them. It doesn't mean it will always happen for multiple reasons, and I'll talk about some of those later. But we do have on our district website, under the A through Z index, language acquisition. Parents can go on at any school. They can fill out the form indicating their interest in a dual language program or in a language acquisition program. They provide that to the school. The school collects those up and turns those into our Office of Curriculum, Instruction, and Professional Development. And that's how we gauge interest among the families that are out there. And that's how we've helped to understand that we need to open more and more programs. So I'll talk a little bit today, this morning, about how we're expanding our programs and our future plans as well. So just a quick look at the map here. Of course, we talked about Henry, and we know that's kind of our, we think of that as kind of our flagship program. It's the one program at the elementary level that is a full TK5 DI model. We have 2 schools over on the west side, Webster and Lafayette. You heard from Ms. Secchi. Those schools have also had their programs running now for a number of years, have been very successful, and are continuing to grow their programs internally. We have Willard before Bixby was the most recent. Willard's had a little bit more trouble getting going, and I'll talk in a moment about why it's a challenge in some communities to grow a program. And then we have Bixby that was most recently added last year. We're excited to be able to share that based on increased interest, we are looking to start an additional program I'll show in a moment over at Chavez. So it's Cesar Chavez Elementary in downtown Long Beach, and I'll talk about what that's going to look like, except it's going the wrong way. There we go. All right, so one of the reasons we're doing this is because we have the interest. If you look up here, these are the number of school of choice applications that were submitted last year for this school year for incoming kindergarten students. So for example, for Bixby's dual immersion program, they received 185 school of choice applications for kindergarten. Now, if you, as you know, students who live in the school of residence boundary for any one school have priority registration before we would consider any school of choice applicant. So at Bixby, they have 120 spots for kindergarten in their dual immersion program this year. About 75 of those are neighborhood students. So Bixby was able to accept approximately 45 or so, 50 students this last year. Henry, you can see, has received 281 school of choice applications last year. They actually can only accept about 30 school of choice applications per year, which is interesting when you heard Dr. Camarino talk about 20 years ago, and they couldn't get neighborhood students to want the program. Now there's about 120 neighborhood students in the Henry neighborhood attendance area that enroll there for the program.
Brian?
Yes.
Are you going to talk about why that is later, or should I ask the question?
Ask the question, and I'll let you
Okay.
know if I'm going to talk about it now.
So can you, and I would say, Ceci, since you were on the ground floor there and you kind of described the neighborhood culture 20 years ago,
Yeah.
can you elaborate more? I think it's important for our community members and parents of native and non-native English speakers to hear sort of the dynamic of why it's important, one, to have a critical mass of non-native and native English speakers for these programs to be effective and to work, considering the models, the three models that we have. But second, that it is, I'll use the word curious, that 20 years ago we couldn't get neighborhood parents to buy into a program. And again, given the native versus non-native English speakers. And now it's one of the challenges that we have, and I'm hoping that you can elaborate, is that in neighborhoods where we do have a critical mass of non-native English speaking parents and students, that they might not be clear, and I'll speak to the constituents in my district, as to the benefits of dual immersion, dual immersion versus EL, versus our heritage programs, because I think that's going to be one of the challenges that we have, right? That we have a critical mass of neighborhood kids. In the case of Chavez, that we have a large percentage that are not non-native English speakers, and that we have a bottleneck clearly here to at least Henry and Bixby, when those neighborhoods 20 years ago, don't feel, look, in some cases smell the same as they do now. So I'm just contextualizing because I'd love to hear sort of you and or Ceci and or any of our exec staff elaborate on the dynamic of first having a critical mass of native and non-native English speakers, and then how the neighborhood plays into that versus also school of choice.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, I appreciate the question, because I think some of the issues you raise are some of the exact challenges that we face. In order to have a really effective dual immersion program, you do need to have both native and non-native speaking students in the class. So in the case of a Spanish-English dual immersion program, we would want to have 25 to 30% of the students being English learners to bring their knowledge of Spanish skills in to support the English-only students. What we've seen at Henry, we actually are having challenges in recruiting and enrolling enough English learners to be able to provide that model for our English-only students. And on the other hand, and when I talk about Chavez here in a moment, and we talk about Webster and Lafayette and Willard, it is a great challenge to, I'll say, convince families of English learner students that dual immersion is actually a great benefit to them, that our California English Learner Roadmap specifically calls out the benefit of dual immersion programs in support of acquiring both English and your native language in Spanish in that case. It is a challenge. And so when I talk about Chavez here in a moment, I'll talk about what we're going to do in our efforts to reach out to the community to tell them exactly why that is important. And I think Cecilia talked a moment ago, 1999 was a very different time in our state. I think the idea of bilingual education had a very negative connotation. Now there's so much more research out about the benefits of it. I think families are just seeing it as more of a benefit maybe they did at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to say any more about that.
As you're coming up here, Ceci, particularly because I think we still are suffering from the negative legacy and stigma associated with bilingual education. Many non-native English-speaking parents worry and have concerns of, oh, how is my child going to learn English, right? Added to that, and it's not mutually exclusive, that we do have some challenges in our district with our long-term English learners. We do have some frustrations from our community members as reflected through the recommendations of the Community Advisory Committee that we just received. So if you could speak to that, Ceci, given that we are 20 years later, but there is still this hysterical,
Hysterical, I use the word hysterical.
legacy associated with speaking more than one language at home and the roles that schools
Right.
play in that process.
You know, there definitely has been a mind shift, and folks now value the fact that we are learning 2 languages and all the benefits. But I'll tell you, the recruitment efforts really for our EL population, so our Spanish-speaking parents, is the work. It's to speak to populations of people who come to the country many times to this country, and they English, that's why they came here. I came to learn English. Spanish is not what I want. Our recruitment efforts, we talk about the benefits, and we really heighten the benefits of learning 2 languages. And we talk to communities like myself. I have a daughter who attended DI programs. She's now in 11th grade at Poly in an AP Spanish world. And although she didn't wind up going to Keller, and we did the homeschool of Hughes, her Spanish right now is up to par with anyone who has been through Keller just from her Henry days of Spanish. So both Jay and I do not speak, well, we speak Spanish at home, but we don't read and write at home. So everything that she learned as a young child in 5th grade at Henry, she brought to herself over at Poly as a 11th grader in an AP class. And I'm able to show writing. So we really have to show parents the benefits, and that's how we recruit. So we recruit in a different way, in testimonials, having folks have them know that people like myself believe in it so much, that my child went through it. I mean, that kind of effort is what's needed. And we do have parents in the program who also have had children. We bring parents along to presentations. So parents speaking to parents, there's nothing like it. So we do a lot of behind the scenes to try to recruit, because we value and we know that an EL child in a DI program, there's nothing like it. To be able to show growth and to value 2 languages. It's not a deficit model, it's an asset model. And so we try to do a lot of different support or recruitment efforts with our EL population.
Thank you. And I'll address some of that a little further as well. So you can see at our other 3 sites outside of Bixby and Henry, we also receive a fair number of applicants, not as many. And in fact, most of those, like the 34 that applied for Willard, most of those also applied at Webster and Lafayette, Henry, and Bixby. So these aren't separate numbers. These are, so the 281 families who applied at Henry likely also applied at, some of them also applied at all those other schools, because they really just want a dual immersion program. So with that, we know we're not able to meet with our current levels of dual immersion classes. We're not able to meet all of the interest that is out there in our school of choice applicants. So we need to look at where those some other places we can try to build programs to meet that.
Can I ask a quick question,
Please,
Brian? You might
yes.
get to it, though.
Yep.
So of the, say, if 281 is the high number of everyone who wants a dual immersion program, and those other numbers nest in there somewhere, do we find a space in a dual immersion program for all of those students, or do we have students who, because particular schools are not available to them, choose an English-only program somewhere else?
Yeah, we have over 250 families that do not get a dual immersion program that want one.
Yeah, and part of that is that they won't accept the offering. So for example, if I didn't get into Bixby and I was offered Willard or Lafayette, they don't want to go to a
Correct.
particular
Right.
school.
So that's what I was getting at.
Correct.
So there is this other issue that somehow, these other programs are.
Correct.
There's a perception
There's
that there's
definitely.
a difference.
Some of it's locality, some of it's geographical, some of it's perception, and so, but all families are offered all programs, but some will not choose particular programs because their eyes set on a program.
And the challenge is that many of these who request a dual immersion program, they might be 7 students from one school, 8 students from another school. So going back to what the Ed Code calls for, and that we're looking for at least 20 in a grade level to open up a program, or 30 across the school. We don't have these, the numbers to justify opening a program at every school where there might be 7 families that want it. So what we're trying to do now is gauge where's their regional interest, and how can we expand the programs regionally to have kind of the feeder patterns like we've done at Webster and Lafayette, like we did at Willard, like we now did with Bixby, and like we're planning to do at Chavez.
But Brian, I think there's an elephant in the room, and I think Board Member Kurz alluded to it, and I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
Clearly, parents that want their kids in a high-quality dual immersion program have no trouble getting their kids to Henry from all over our district. When there could be a much closer dual immersion program to them. So I think, again, for all the pride that we have in Long Beach for our diversity, I think neighborhood context is a big reason why some parents don't want their kids, and again, assuming that we're growing some programs are more established in certain parts of town.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it behooves us, and it's implicit, right? We know this, I'm just saying it, right? Some parents don't want their kids going across town, I'm not gonna say where, to another place in town because of the neighborhood optics, perceptions, whatever you wanna say, right? Those neighborhoods that are not bottlenecked tend to be our working class neighborhoods, right? That's the data speaking. I'm just re-articulating what the data is. So I think it behooves us as a district, and when you get to Chavez, I mean, I'm gonna jump all in, Brian, so I'm gonna let you get to Chavez, to be very cognizant, but also very deliberate, right? That this is also, in some ways, a school of choice problem, right? Because parents want their kids, and again, I want my kid at the best school possible. And so there is this disparate view of not just schools, but the neighborhoods that the schools are in. Right? So I think it behooves us to, when you get to Chavez, when we get to the other proposed sites, that we cannot ignore that we have a bottleneck to particular schools in a particular part of town. And on the other hand, all the evidence shows that having high quality dual immersion programs is good for everyone, right. District-wide, but yet, our most vulnerable parts of the town, I think, fall victim to these contextualized circumstances. So I'm going to let you get to Chavez, Brian.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I wanted to just point it out that the elephant in the room is that we don't have a bottleneck to certain schools in certain parts of our district.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt. I think we saw when we look at the data a moment ago. If we opened up 3 more dual immersion schools over on the east side, they'd be full. Yeah. And if we opened up 5, they'd be full. Like we know that they're parents in our community who value it and will go if it's in their neighborhood and won't if it's not. And so, that's probably a larger societal challenge we need to work on within our community. What we can do is, I think, what we're trying to do, which is then let's bring the programs to those families that we know it's beneficial for them. We know it's beneficial for English learners, and we know that it may be more feasible for them to get to the program.
But let me add something to what Dr. Benitez has mentioned. I know early on we were concerned about that kind of an issue, those kinds of an issues when we were going through the segregation of our schools in Long Beach. But we saw something occur at Poly that was very strategic, in that parents from other parts of the district did in fact see value in bringing their kids into Poly High School for a lot of our programs, PACE and so forth and so on. If we can create that kind of phenomena with some of our other schools, I think you know, some of that stigma has been diminished because of that. So, I mean, being able to build on that kind of a concept, I think would help us in some of these cases.
And we actually have data on our side. So Lafayette is a well-established program. The fifth graders at Lafayette, some people won't like to hear this, the fifth graders in the dual immersion program at Lafayette are on par with the fifth graders at Henry in their dual immersion program. So the way that they're performing on standardized assessments or state assessments, fifth graders in dual immersion at Lafayette are at the same level as fifth graders coming out of Henry.
And go ahead.
I don't think that comes as a surprise to any of us who have been to Lafayette and experienced those programs. When you walk into that school, when you are in those classrooms, it feels like a classroom at any other school on any side of town or whatever. And we know, because we've seen it firsthand, the quality of instruction that they're receiving. So that comes as no surprise to me, that the Lafayette students are performing on par with Henry students.
So our job, as we're expanding in other places, is to build on our success, not just at Henry, but at many of our schools.
And I think for us, that was the piece I was getting at, yours as well, but also that messaging piece of how do those 281 folks know that about Lafayette? Because those are the things, that's why folks go to Poly from all over the city for PACE, because they've decided that what happens there overrides whatever preconceived idea they have about neighborhoods and all of those other things to get that done. And so as we expand, but continuing to lift up these programs as not just that we have one flagship, because we have students coming out of another school in a very different neighborhood who are equally as successful. So we know that certain schools catch fire and it becomes the buzz. We look at what happened with Marshall, from where Marshall was 8 years ago to where Marshall is now as a middle school. So I'm interested in a bigger conversation about making sure as we move forward and expand, but that we're also raising up these schools as incredibly viable options, especially for those families who have the ability to drive their kids to school.
Right. So we strategically did some things in the last couple of years to make that even more obvious. One of the things at our education celebration, when folks come in and say, "Where's Henry?" Right? We want to get to the Henry booth. We let them know where all of our dual immersion sites are, so they can go visit all of those schools and hear about them. When families go on to apply for school of choice for dual immersion, they used to go on and all the schools would be listed and they would just find Henry and choose Henry dual immersion. Now the dual immersion sites are called out separately, specifically. So if you want a dual immersion program, you can see that we now have 5 programs that you can choose. So we're trying to encourage families to apply at all of them. We let them know that the likelihood of getting into Henry is very small and that we encourage at these other sites. As you heard about, when the folks from Chavez come out to Long Beach and are part of our, they run their convention here, their program, they want to visit, we try to get them over to Lafayette and some other sites just as much as we might at Henry. So we do try to message that, but it is an uphill challenge with families who perceive Henry to be a better program and a better location for a variety of reasons.
Right, and I meant that as a collective, we, not you,
Right,
we,
right,
us,
sure.
we as well.
Absolutely.
In that work.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful too, not to invite invidious comparisons that this school is better than that school because of this program. If it's great to have algebra in the 8th grade at this school, we ought to have it at all schools. And we ought to expand the dual immersion in that way also, so that opportunities for involvement is there for all parents, all families, and all neighborhoods.
Absolutely. So I can talk about Chavez for a moment. We've been trying to get to Chavez for a while, haven't we? It's good. These are good questions. I like this. So a couple of things that are really exciting about, I think, Chavez having an opportunity to be a flagship in a part of the city that hasn't had dual immersion. Right now, their principal, Brenda Ocampo, she was an assistant principal at Lafayette, and so she was there during, as an administrator, running the dual immersion program. Her own children are English learners, and attended Lafayette's. One of them is actually still at Lafayette as, I believe, a 3rd grader attending their dual immersion program. Their oldest is in 8th grade now. And so she comes from both the experience of the principal knowing that the program works. She comes from the parent perspective, having her own children, and she comes from the parent of an English learner perspective, having her children in and seeing the success of that. So we feel like she really is the right person. We actually placed her there this last year thinking we might be going to Chavez in dual immersion. So we think ahead. It's good, right? That's strategic planning. But one of the things we know that the biggest challenge that Ms. Ocampo is going to have, and we're all going to have, we've talked about it, is convincing the families in the Chavez neighborhood that dual immersion is the right program for their children, and specifically convincing the families of English learners that it is the right program for them. We have a lot of support and research that we're going to be providing, a lot of outreach to families. I want to talk a little about some of the other outreach beyond just Chavez. We know that in order to grow a program, we need to have community interest beyond just that one site. We have this regional interest. So we are currently putting together parent workshops, outreach workshops that will be taking place at Edison, Oropesa, and at Stevenson. You can see those are all relatively close to Chavez and are easily within walking distance or a short drive. We know that there's some interest at each of those schools. So Ms. Ocampo will be going out working with those principals to hold parent meetings, inform about the importance of dual immersion, about the benefits for all students, specifically for English learners. They will have a booth at the education celebration, advertising as well. They'll be part of the school of choice process. So we're hoping we get not just a big commitment from Chavez families, but also some families from these other 3 sites. And then not too far away, we'll also do some outreach to both Roosevelt and Lincoln and see, again, our goal, ideally, we would be able to have 2 or 3 full classes of English-Spanish dual immersion and have that be the only track. If we find that there's still a good number of students in the Chavez neighborhood that want English, then we would open up a dual track model like we have at Webster and at Lafayette and at Willard. It's really going to depend on interest. So our family's interest and commitment is really what drives our numbers. But our job is to do the outreach and the education, and that's what we're doing over the next 2 to 3 months, is really putting a lot of outreach and education out into the community. We're going to be accessing the email addresses of people who live in the community broadly, maybe don't have children currently attending Chavez, so that we can get the word out to the whole downtown area that this is a program that is valuable. They may have 2 and 3-year-olds that will eventually be there. They may have friends and neighbors that they might recommend this program to. We're also going to be doing some pretty strong outreach to all the local churches and other preschool programs. I'll be meeting with Cindy and Claudia with our CDC and Head Start programs, and really doing a full press to all of those folks who might be out in the community with 4-year-olds coming into a kindergarten program next year in all of the downtown area and broader into Long Beach, to see if we can get them to apply for school of choice and really build this program strongly from the very beginning.
Brian, and I'm going to say it just because I know it's hard. I know you won't say it, Brian, because you're a good guy. I think, so it's a layered approach, obviously, which you just described. But I think one of the things that raises the profile of the quality of the schools across the district is we have a bunch of high-end housing that's built in downtown Long Beach. Parents that are college-educated professionals with young children that are, for whatever reason, are not sending their kids, do not want to send their kids to Chavez, Oropesa, Edison, Stevenson, Whittier, in that part of town. So if those parents come to terms with and understand that this is an awesome program, right? Yep. This is an awesome opportunity in a world-class district, I think it raises the profile for other parents in downtown being like, what?
Yep.
You're on the promenade, you're sending your kid to Chavez, but I thought that was, so that's one, right? I think the second is, and this is why I appreciate this effort, we have to also raise the academic outcomes for schools in that part of town, right? Because then parents, then those kinds of things get magnified, right? This is the reason I'm not sending my kid here, even if they have a new dual immersion program. The third piece, and this is why I sort of started off the conversation, I appreciate our parents coming in, is I think this is extra motivation for us to address some of the challenges with our ELs, right? Because it's hard to destigmatize our quote-unquote EL population if all indicators demonstrate that they are amongst our lowest performers, just in terms of academics. So I think part of the cultural shift is, and we've talked about this, let's really think about not calling ELs anymore, emerging bilinguals, right? I know we're moving in that direction, because just putting EL on something, just saying English learner, again, has this sort of negative historical stigma attached to it. And lastly, what I'll say is this. And again, I'm vested, I'm happy, I'm excited about the direction we're going in. And it's to John Meyer's point, that if we are looking at another program in North Long Beach or East Long Beach, that inherently parents will look at location and say, well, if I have 3 choices here, so I think, again, whether it's partnerships in downtown with the Civic Center, with the Aquarium of the Pacific, we talked about this, Chris, that, on the surface, if we boutique it in a way to get a critical mass of those downtown luxury condo parents that are there, and I'm not hating on them, I'm just saying, hey, they're there, right? And they're not going anywhere, and they have young children, with a combination of doing right by those neighborhood kids, which represent the critical mass of non-native English speakers, and not just in Spanish, if you will, right? That it will attract parents from potentially other parts of town, so that when we do explore North Long Beach or the other parts of towns, they're like, oh, and one of those is coming to our neighborhood soon, while at the same time raising the profile of Willard, Webster, and those programs that we're still trying to build. So I wanted to say that because I want to be very clear, and I know it's difficult, right, sometimes, especially coming from your position, Brian, to call it out in a way that we need to get those affluent parents from downtown. Use me. Right? Let's get my daughter in that school of choice pipeline to get her to Chavez, all right, at this point, so that I can tell the story that Ceci said and say, hey, my daughter went to that program, that awesome program when it was starting off. So I think there is a critical mass of affluent, college-educated, professional parents that are looking for where are they going to send their 4 or 5-year-old next year and the year beyond that.
And I would just add, we have a great track record of doing things just like what you said, Dr. Benitez. So for example, we will be visiting all the homeowners associations, and you'll be invited as well as others. But it's like anything. So when we started the journey, and I was there at Henry when we had, it was pretty intense. I'll just be honest with you. They didn't want the program there. Things have shifted, which is a positive. And it is true, Chavez has a great partnership with the aquarium. They're a high-performing school. So the other issue is you have to have what I call those early adapters. Yep. So individuals who are going to step out of their comfort zone, who are going to put their children in other places like my wife and I did, So the issue is, once you have that critical mass, and it's going to take time, and going back to what Board Member Kurt talked about, I'll never forget the meeting when we transformed Marshall. Okay, nobody wanted to go Marshall. There was hardly any neighborhood kids who would go to Marshall, and we had 7 trailblazers. There were 7 moms from Carver who said, we have this vision, the district's going to support us on this vision, and they were the early adapters of that becoming an arts middle school, and now today it's the #1 high school, middle school for choice. So I share that with you because it's going to take time. It's going to take these issues. But the beauty is an important part of the district is as we roll all these programs out, they have to go geographical, because the other elephant in the room, I'm just going to be honest, and me, I'm not Mr. Downer by any means, but I will be on this one, is in some cases, dual immersion costs us money, okay? So, and I'm just going to call out Willard, and I'm going to call out Webster. So we actually, in the LCAP, build in a lot of money, because what happens is that kids start out in dual immersion, but then they drop out for whatever reason. So what happens is that we have to fund extra FTE, which is a position for those who don't know education jargon. And that costs a lot of money, because an average teacher salary here in Long Beach is $150,000. So we are basically putting money into a program. And so we have to be cognizant of that, because starting tomorrow, people will hear at our interim, we will start deficit spending by a lot of money. It will be about $20 million, which is not what we want to do. So we have the huge challenge of continuing these wonderful programs and great programs for kids, making sure that we're fiscally sound, because you won't be able to do those wonderful programs. So to share that with you, that it's important to go slow to go fast. Really important. So I'm excited about all this work. and I'm proud because the board has always set a strategic plan ahead of us. And so, and we will be in good shape, but I just want people, I mean, it's about recruitment, it's about funding, it's about materials, it's about getting qualified individuals. As Ceci said, just because I have a big class doesn't mean I'm the best person to teach that program. So, which is really exciting, and I will tell you, we have all departments on board with all these initiatives.
Yeah,
So-
and the big, and inherent in that, Chris, is the community cultural piece, right? That we can do all these wonderful things and we can make all these recommendations and take actions, but if parents in that neighborhood still don't believe that that's a valuable 21st century skill set and that this is a school that has it, so the messaging and the community education piece, I think, go hand in hand with the resources, right? Because then it's easier for us to justify why we're doing this if the programs are filling up, if they're vibrant. You know,
I think one way we can address that is to have school tours. I know we do that for middle schools and high schools because we have school of choice. I know for us and our family, we chose a middle school that was not in the neighborhood because when we went to visit that school, we met the people at that school, you know, the front office, the administrators, teachers, and we felt very comfortable on that school campus. We felt it was a warm and welcoming environment. And I think if people were to actually visit, you know, and I mentioned Lafayette because that's a school that I've been to more than Webster or Willard, so I'm more familiar with that one. But if we had tours and if people were to visit that campus to see the classrooms, those kids in action, the teachers, they would maybe be more open to that possibility. If we can encourage that kind of thing, that could maybe be a part of the success and that outreach and recruitment.
I think that's definitely a part of it, Diana. I agree with you. I think the point I'm trying to emphasize is, and you know, it is what it is, how important it is for us to do this while we're establishing the DI programs and strengthen them, to uplift the diversity that we're trying to uphold and appreciate. So for instance, you know, I just got a bunch of communication from parents about how happy they are with the new books that have been added to all of our elementary school libraries that include a much more diverse, inclusive list of books. So again, if we're exposing parents across the district and we're placing an institutional value that's supported by resources, then those parents are like, oh, these are really cool things that are going on. It's not from parents that are resistant to it. It's just like, hey, we just got a whole new set of extremely diverse books at our library that all of our elementary school children. So it raises, again, the profile of the cultural assets that we have here.
Right. And I think that's definitely a benefit when we talk about dual immersion is it's not just bilingual and biliterate, but it's bicultural. And it's and that's probably the piece of the messaging that we need to work on the most, because I think people can see the benefits to a bilingual education, but it's that bicultural piece that is key to the you know, recruitment and the you know, getting out the word of the great benefits to the
For our
program.
Khmer families, for our Tagalog families, for everyone, right?
So I'm going to use that as a transition because I do have a few more slides. I mean, part of this is we know that we know this is not an easy topic because it gets into neighborhoods, it gets into people's beliefs, it gets into perceptions. We saw when you saw that first map of where our dual immersion programs are. There's a big hole up in North Long Beach and Lakewood that we know we need to address. So as we're building this program, and you'll hear some of our next steps, but we know that there's more to be done. We're, you know, by building Bixby last year, bringing Chavez on next year, we think we're making some nice strides in those
Brian, you
efforts.
mentioned Lakewood. Do we know how many families are interested from the Lakewood area in dual immersion?
Like, I can tell you on school of choice, the most was up in the Lakewood area. I believe the most was Gompers. There were about 12 to 14 that applied to Henry last year. Madison's always had quite a few. But there's not enough at any one school justify an entire program at that school. But that is what we're looking at now to see in the North Long Beach and Lakewood area, especially at the kind of the western part of Lakewood. So I want to take a few minutes, and I know, but the questions are great, so thank you for the interactive conversation. I do want to talk a little bit about the interest in Khmer language acquisition programs. So we know there's interest in the community, and we're grateful for that interest. We don't necessarily have, at any one school, we don't necessarily have the input from the parents of children at that school that they're interested in a dual immersion program. We know there's broad interest in the community, but the ed code requirement that we usually go by is how many of our families are letting us know with the forms that are available on our website. So that's not to say we can't do it without that, but that's always been the trigger that we've gone through to see where are there enough families to justify opening up a whole classroom.
So is it just on our website we have information and then people contact us instead of us maybe surveying the parents?
Right.
Or?
So we do our own outreach to check on interest. What I'm saying is that there's a legal requirement that we follow,
that's
and that
the
one
legal
we've never
one.
quite met the threshold to open up a Khmer dual language program at any one school. Please, yes.
So your question, Board Member Craighead, is it just an online application?
Right.
No, we have the forms at every school on their counter, and every school's website also informs parents of how to go to the school and ask for that form.
Okay, thank you.
One of the challenges when we look at a Khmer language program, we have there are instructional materials that are in an English language arts format with Khmer as the language. But right now in California, there is no state-adopted textbooks in math, social studies, or science that are translated into Khmer. And so that's a huge challenge when you're trying to start a dual immersion program, because you need to have the textbooks in the target language to support that.
Math, social studies, and
Math, social studies, or science. So when we think about the core subjects in elementary school, language arts, math, social studies, and science, we don't, there are currently no state-adopted textbooks in Khmer in those three content areas, so that's a challenge. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier, ideal dual immersion programs will have a percentage of English learners and a percentage of EOs, for use of a better term, that want to learn the target language. And we know that in the past, when we had some Khmer language programs at Whittier, for example, we do have interest oftentimes in our Cambodian American families, but we don't necessarily have interest in our African American families and our Latino families. So that's something that we would need to build if we're going to build a really strong dual immersion program. So outside of that, what we have is we have opportunities for what you heard earlier in the heritage language program. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that might look like in our district and some thoughts we have moving forward with that. So Whittier Elementary School could be a great location for a Khmer heritage language program for a couple of reasons. You've heard about the challenges with teacher credentialing. In order to teach in a dual language program, you need to have a B-CLAD, which is a certain type of credential that allows you to teach in two languages. We only have, the only teachers in our district who are B-CLAD in both English or in Khmer are at Whittier currently. They were there years ago when there was a program at Whittier. So there are about 5 teachers currently teaching at Whittier that have their B-CLAD in Khmer, and they're the only ones in the district. So if we were to do a program, it would make most sense for that reason to start the program at Whittier. We also know that Whittier does have a fairly high number of Cambodian American students that may be interested in a program. Our current thinking would be to have the program be as an after-school or Saturday school program. It opens up a couple of different options. One, it would allow students at other schools to come to that program. So this program would be open not just to students at Whittier, but we would open up the program to any students in our district who wanted to participate. They could get to Whittier after school or could come for a Saturday program. So we think there's benefits in expanding it beyond just the one school in that way. And we know that there's a lot of value that that builds on community and culture, and we value and respect our Cambodian community, and we want to be able to, with an after-school or Saturday program, we could also have community speakers, resources, to come in together to kind of co-teach and support our students with some partnerships. So that's our current thinking. I've spoken with Mr. Jesperson, the principal at Whittier. We're looking at starting this up, if possible, even this school year, not waiting much longer. So we're gonna gauge some interest within the Whittier school immediately, and then some neighboring schools to see what the interest might be to start something as early as possibly February or March even. So that's our current thinking. Mr. Steinhauser, do you want to add into that? Okay. That's our current thinking based on some of the challenges, the greatest of which are access to translated materials that are state adopted, the challenges of credentialed teachers, and then just the need to balance having both English learners and native speakers and English only students that are interested in the program for it to be a really effective dual immersion model. So just in summary, kind of some next steps, both with dual immersion and heritage language. We talked about expanding dual immersion at Chavez, and we know there's a lot of efforts that need to go into that and outreach and community education to all of our families living in the downtown area. We do plan to develop the Khmer Heritage Language Program at Whittier. We're working with HRS. David Zaid is well aware of the challenges in staffing, needing to have highly qualified BCLAD teachers in whatever target language we're teaching. We even foresee some potential shortages in Spanish BCLAD teachers. So we know we need to do more outreach and make sure we get highly qualified teachers for all these programs we want to build before we build a program. We can't get a program and not have the highly qualified teachers to staff it. And then we're currently and will continue to gauge interest in dual immersion programs with families in our North Long Beach and Lakewood communities. We know that that's an area that doesn't have them now that likely should. And so that would be our next direction, is to head up into the North Long Beach and Lakewood areas to see what the interest might be.
And I would just add regarding both the Spanish dual immersion as well as the Khmer, that we're going to do, we have to do a lot more outreach and planning, more for one program versus the other. So for example, on the Khmer, starting our recommendation is to start the Khmer heritage language as Brian talked about, but at the same time do the research on which families are interested, how can we write, the materials issues is a huge issue. How can we go for it? So that's going to be a little longer process, to be very honest with you, but we don't want to wait on the heritage piece. We want to start that right away. And at the same time, as Brian said, Brian and Pamela are working closely with David and Ruth on the recruitment process for qualified teachers in all these categories, because that is a huge issue too. So I'll just stop it there. And I do know, Dr. Williams, that we have speakers that want to speak to the Khmer part. Right. So this might be the right time for them to do this, since Brian stopped that, and then you can ask questions after they speak. So that
Thank you, Brian. Just stay close.
Okay. I don't know if my voice will hold up, but I'll see.
All right. First speaker is Nicholas Cabeza.
Good morning, board members and superintendent. First off, I'd like to recognize everyone from the community who came out to engage on this item, so thank you. My name is Nicholas Cabeza, and I'm here on behalf of Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, who represents Long Beach, San Pedro, Signal Hill, and Catalina Island in the State Assembly. As chair of the Assembly Education Committee and a teacher for over 20 years, Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell understands the need to create an inclusive learning environment for all students to reach their full potential. Dual language programs not only help students succeed in the classroom, they also provide students with the skills to remain competitive in a globalized economy. While Khmer is the primary language spoken in Cambodia, Long Beach is one of the few places where Khmer is considered a major language. With approximately 50,000 Cambodian residents in the Long Beach community, it's important that all students have the opportunity to learn in an environment that promotes an understanding and appreciation of languages and diverse cultures. However, the Assembly member recognizes that there is a teacher shortage and throughout the state, and it is an issue you must consider, as noted early in this presentation. On behalf of Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, thank you for your commitment to supporting the personal and academic success of every student. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chan Hobson.
Good morning. Thank you. Today I prefer to forego my speech, but I will give a space to Dr. Natalie Tran.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Natalie Tran from the National Resource Center for Asian Languages at Cal State Fullerton. Currently, we support 5 languages, including Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Khmer. And first, I would like to congratulate on your successful Spanish dual language immersion programs. It's really a testament to your leadership, as well as the leadership of the district and the staff. Thank you for the opportunity to share comments regarding the exploration of a Khmer English language program at Long Beach Unified School District. As we've heard this morning, this work is exciting, and I hope that the district will take part in becoming a leader to establish the first Khmer English program in the state, in the country, and actually in the world. This endeavor requires work, as we have heard, as it is, especially for Khmer, we recognize that it is a less commonly taught language, but we have seen from other less commonly taught Southeast Asian language programs in dual language immersion, such as Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese, and Hmong in Central Valley. They have been very successful in their programs in recruiting students, identifying teachers, and identifying instructional resources to support these programs. They work with the university, with community-based organizations, with a lot of funds of knowledge and resources in the community to develop a teacher pipeline, recruitment of teachers, training the teachers, as well as supporting the parents in the community. The number of dual language immersion teachers in the state are expected to increase with the passing of Proposition 58 over the next decade due to the amount of resources, effort that have been put forward at the state level. And so we anticipate that this will also translate into the local level as well. In terms of instructional materials and resources for Khmer, it's possible to obtain through partnerships with various language resource centers and potential support at the local, national, and global agency. As we've seen, that has been the case for our less commonly taught languages, such as Mandarin, Japanese, and Korean, and Vietnamese as well. In addition, we believe that a Khmer dual language immersion program will help increase the district. We talk about the being fiscally responsive, the budget in increasing inter-district transfer. We talk about some of the enrollment issues this morning, and also keeping our Khmer families in the district. Case in point, Westminster, about half an hour from here, has consistently received 15 per year inter-district transfer into their program per grade level. With any new program, it is expected that work will be needed. Resource must be invested. However, it is absolutely necessary to create an equitable educational experiences for all of our students in our communities. Currently, as the speaker before me mentioned, there are 50,000 Khmer residents living in the Long Beach area.
Let me ask you just, your time is up.
Sure.
You can just bring it to a close.
Okay. So I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you. An enrichment program such as an after-school program, a weekend program, will not be sufficient in the long term. We've heard about the benefits of all the amazing things that a dual language immersion program can offer. The enrichment program do not provide the same level of access in terms of rigor and quality that our students would experience in a dual language immersion program. And also the same level of parental engagement. In closing, we ask that our Khmer students and our community deserve the same opportunity and equal access to the benefits of the dual program. And then also to be more inclusive and reflective of the diverse communities that we serve in the Long Beach area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Hobson.
Hi, my name is Mark Hobson. She already mentioned some of the stuff I was going to talk about inter-district transfers. But, the important thing is that was mentioned earlier in their report is the benefits of the dual immersion. And a heritage program, like she said, doesn't have those same benefits. There is a small after-school program, not a heritage, not official program, where the kids are learning their language. and they're learning a lot. They're doing very well. They're learning to read and write, and that's something they're not learning at home, like the lady mentioned in Spanish. They speak it at home, but they don't read and write. And so the dual immersion would have a much greater benefit than, a heritage language. I mean, it's good for the heritage language to have that for the older students who cannot start at, the early grade levels. But, the biggest benefit is the dual immersion, and that should be, the important one to work on for the younger students. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Questions? Anyone?
I'll just be really quick, because I know we're really behind on time. Thank you to are we done with public speakers? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank everyone from the community and our state legislative representatives to come out and speak with us. I think what I'm hearing is that we are all committed to the long-term growth and expansion of these programs, including these early steps of a Kamai program. I would ask, I think our state partners just left, but we had obviously Senator Gonzalez and Assemblymember O'Donnell here in the room with us wanting to support this. So if we don't have state-approved materials yet, asking them to push on the CDE to say, hey, we want to do this, and figure out what kind of support or waivers we can work with and utilize their advocacy and support to get something done not just for us, but potentially for other communities around the state. And as far as I'm acutely aware of the budget issues, so I know as we are building Bixby, I think that's a great model for us to see what those hard costs are, as well as those unexpected costs as we grow a program, so that as we start to budget 2 and 3 and 4 years out, if we're looking at starting additional programs in either language, that we know what those anticipated costs are, so we can begin to weigh that as we do our budget process going forward.
I would echo that as well, and thanking our community partners and members coming out. The other piece I'd like to highlight is here's another opportunity and example of what the community partnership model brings. So like with KPA, Chan, thanks for being here, but other organizations, UCC, KGA, we it's not just about leveraging, all right, but we have these community assets there. So I also want to recognize all the work that Chan has done at Whittier, right? When we also need to recognize that we have a champion principal there, Principal Jesperson. So it's a combination of those things, but again, the partnership piece is essential to this.
Thank you. Chris, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we're way behind schedule. We knew that was going to happen. So my recommendation would be that we break for lunch now. We come back and do the bond program. I'm going to recommend that we move, reschedule.
Mr. Superintendent, I believe we have an issue maybe with breaking for lunch. The food may not be here.
Okay, well, then if that were the case, then I would recommend,
You want to bring in something?
well, we could, Quentin, is Quentin?
Okay.
Quentin, is Dr. Mr. Brown in the audience, who was here earlier? He's not? Okay, does already. So, Mrs. No? So if we have to adjust, could your department start and then we could do a break and then go into it or not? Well, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'd have to call if you
Okay.
And Chris, do we need a fully 45 minutes for lunch?
No,
Can
we
just
don't.
do a half an
So-
hour lunch, cut the break?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that. So so let's just hold for 1 moment and find out if the food is there. And if not, then we will, it's like any good teacher, we will be flexible and repurpose what we're going to do. But we are going to have to cut something down, to be very honest with you. So I've already given Robert Tagorda heads up that we may move Parent University to another time, and we'll work that one out. But let me see, Christy, can you do me a favor and see if Quentin Brown is available to come down to do his presentation? So.
Okay, so in the meantime, I have a question about the proposed program at Whittier. So you mentioned that we have teachers at Whittier who may be available to teach in Kamai.
Yes, we have
Yeah, I'm sorry.
5 B-clad Khmer teachers. We used to have a bilingual Khmer program at Whittier, so years and years ago. And then because
Okay.
of interest from the parents, because it was dwindling, that's why it went away. So back then, we had to write our own materials, basically the textbooks for the program. So
Right.
what we're saying is, in order for us, we have to do our homework on interest, all that kind of thing.
Right.
Because you need at least 30 students, both native as well as non-native, to go in the program.
So with the proposal of having an after-school program or Saturday program, that would be the first step in to
Correct.
reintroducing a dual immersion program in a regular school
Correct.
day.
Correct. We are recommending to move forward with the Heritage Program, and at the same time, on the same parallel track, researching the potential of the DI program in Khmer, but it's going to take us time, as we've heard, on all those other aspects.
Okay.
It's a little more complicated than the Spanish. We're doing the same thing on the Spanish piece, to be very honest with you, so,
Yeah.
that type thing. So.
Okay, and then one of the challenges would be the resources as far as textbooks, that
And
type of
student
thing.
interest. We have to make sure that we have at least, so for example, when you look at the Chavez example, we're going to shoot for 60 students because we know we're going to lose students up the road. So if you start with only one class of 30, you can end up with a 5th grade class of 10. That is not feasible. So
Right,
what we have to
right.
do is, we have to do a lot of work on our side of the house, talking
Right.
about what you all have said about recruitment and marketing and interest and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you're really probably looking at the earliest for the DI would be in the fall of 21. So, because it's going to take time for us to build all
Right,
this stuff.
right.
Thank you, Chris. We're going to break for lunch, but for the speakers who are listed to speak on the bond issue, we're going to bring that back after lunch if it's okay with you? Okay, so we'll break for lunch for 30 minutes. Lunch is ready. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll come back in 30 minutes. Thank
30
you, everybody.
minutes.